Okay, learner. So have you ever felt completely swamped? Like you're juggling a million things and your to-do list is more like a to-do novel? You know that feeling, right? Where being on top of it all feels totally impossible.
Yeah, that's so relatable. I think we've all been there, that feeling of just wanting to find some calm in the middle of all the chaos.
Exactly. And maybe you've even tried those time management things, gone to a seminar or two, hoping for that magic solution.
Oh, yeah, or maybe it's even hitting closer to home, like trying to get your kids to cooperate sometimes feels like you're negotiating a peace treaty.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into some ideas that can actually change how you approach, well, everything, really.
We're not talking about like quick fixes or anything.
No, not at all.
We're going deep.
We're going deep, exactly. And to do that, we're going to be looking at Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
It's a classic for a reason.
Oh, yeah. It's packed with insights, and we're going to pull out the key takeaways so you don't have to wade through the whole thing.
Consider this like your shortcut to understanding some really core principles that can help you find more peace and get more done.
And what's interesting is that Covey's own journey into all of this started with a personal challenge.
Yeah, he and his wife Sandra were having a tough time with one of their sons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he wasn't enjoying baseball at all. It seemed like he was getting discouraged really easily by the other kids laughing.
Oh, that's hard.
And they were worried about his self-esteem, like any parent would be.
Of course.
So they tried all the usual things, encouraging words, trying to be supportive.
Right, all the things you think you're supposed to do.
Exactly, but nothing seemed to be working.
So it was like they were stuck.
Yeah, totally. And what's even more interesting is that at the same time, Covey was working on leadership development programs for IBM.
So he was already thinking about effectiveness and what makes people successful.
Exactly. He was deep into understanding human interaction and how people perceive things.
Wow. So he's got this personal struggle with his son and then this professional background in leadership.
Right. It all comes together in a really fascinating way.
Okay, so to really dig into Covey's ideas, let's start with this key distinction he makes. The personality ethic versus the character ethic.
Okay, so the personality ethic, it's all about those external things.
Like what?
Like techniques and image, like how to influence people.
Oh, so like those communication skills courses and stuff?
Exactly. Or even like projecting a certain image.
Like a power look or something?
Yeah. The excerpts even mention things like being manipulative or deceptive.
Whoa, okay, so not exactly ethical?
Right. And it's interesting because Covey suggests that this personality ethic has become really prevalent.
Like it's all about the quick fix.
Right, like if you just learn a few tricks, you can suddenly be successful. But Covey argues that real effectiveness comes from a different place.
From the character ethic.
Exactly. It's about building from the inside out.
So it's not about faking it?
No, it's about those fundamental principles like integrity, honesty, basic human decency.
It's who you are at your core.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting because Covey realized that he and his wife had actually been operating from the personality ethic when it came to their son.
Wait, really? With the baseball thing?
Yeah, they were so focused on his behavior, on trying to prevent him from being laughed at, that they missed something really important.
What's that?
Their own paradigms, their own way of seeing the situation.
So their own stuff was getting in the way.
Exactly. Their desire to be seen as good parents was actually influencing how they were approaching the whole thing.
That's a big realization.
It is, and that's when they decided to make a shift.
What did they do?
They let go of their old assumptions about their son. They stopped trying to fix him or compare him to other kids.
So they stopped trying to control him.
Yeah, and instead they focused on simply enjoying being with him.
Just accepting him for who he was.
Exactly, and they stopped trying to shield him from things like the other kids' laughter.
So he had to face those natural consequences.
Right, and it wasn't easy at first. There was some, what Covey calls withdrawal pains.
Like he was used to them protecting him.
Yeah, but they held firm in their new approach.
It's interesting because Covey doesn't say that the personality ethic stuff is all bad.
Right, he acknowledges that things like good communication skills can be helpful.
So where do those things fit in?
He calls those secondary traits, not primary.
So they're important, but not the most important thing.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of building a house on a weak foundation.
Oh, I get it. Like you can have all the fancy finishes, but if the foundation is shaky, the whole thing will eventually crumble.
Exactly. And he quotes Emerson, "What you are shouts so loudly in my ears that I cannot hear what you say."
Wow, that's powerful.
It really is. Your character speaks volumes, even if you're trying to say something different.
Okay, so let's talk about these maps that Covey mentions. What are those all about?
So these maps, they're our paradigms, our way of seeing the world.
Like our own personal heads.
Exactly. We all have these mental maps and we interpret everything through them.
And the thing is, we often don't even realize we have them.
Right. We just assume that we're seeing things objectively.
Like our perspective is the only right one.
Exactly. And Covey uses that visual illusion of the young woman, old woman, to illustrate this.
Oh, yeah, that one's classic.
Two people can look at the exact same image and see completely different things.
And they can both be right.
Exactly. It's not about logic, it's about perception.
And our perception is shaped by all sorts of things, our past experiences, our beliefs.
Exactly. So when we describe what we see, we're actually revealing our own paradigms.
It's like we're all wearing different colored glasses.
And that leads to these things called paradigm shifts.
So what are those?
It's when we suddenly see things in a completely new way.
Like a big ha moment.
Exactly. And these shifts can be so powerful, they can change our attitudes, our behaviors, our relationships.
But they can be positive or negative, right?
Right. Covey says that the shift from the character ethic to the personality ethic is actually a negative paradigm shift.
Because it takes us away from those core principles.
Exactly, but positive paradigm shifts can happen too, like in that story he tells about the man on the train.
Oh, yeah, the one with the kids who were acting up.
At first he was annoyed, but then he said that the kid's mother had just died.
And his whole perspective changed.
Instantly he felt empathy and compassion instead of irritation.
It's amazing how quickly our feelings can change when our understanding shifts.
Right, and that's the power of a paradigm shift.
So Covey talks about these universal principles that are the foundation of the character ethic. What are some examples of those?
He compares them to natural laws like gravity.
But for human interaction.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that these aren't tied to any specific religion or philosophy.
They're just like fundamental truths about how to be effective.
Exactly, like fairness, integrity, honesty, recognizing human dignity.
He even mentions the Declaration of Independence.
Right. And also things like service excellence and the principle of growth.
That we all have the potential to develop and become better.
And he stresses that growth is a sequential process.
You can't skip steps.
Right, it's like a child learning to walk.
You have to crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run.
And he says this is true for emotional and character development, too.
Which is where that story about the father and the toys comes in.
Yeah, that dad was trying to force his daughter to share before she was ready.
Like he's trying to skip a step in her development.
Exactly, and he was more concerned with how it looked to the other parents than with his daughter's actual growth.
So he was operating from that personality ethic again.
Right, and Covey suggests that a more effective approach would have been to let the daughter make her own choice about sharing.
Maybe redirecting her attention to something else.
Right, and he points out that real sharing often comes naturally once a child has a solid sense of ownership.
So it all comes back to that idea that the way we see the problem is the problem.
Exactly. We often get so focused on trying to fix the symptoms that we miss the underlying cause.
Like reaching for a Band-Aid when what you really need is surgery.
And Covey provides some really thought-provoking questions to help us examine our own paradigms.
Like what?
Well, he asks things like, if you're constantly questioning your employees' loyalty, could it be that the way you see them is part of the problem?
That's a good one.
Or if you always feel pressed for time, maybe your beliefs about productivity are contributing to that feeling.
Yeah, it's like we're often our own worst enemy.
And that's where the inside-out approach comes in.
What's that?
It's about recognizing those universal principles within ourselves.
Like our conscience.
Exactly. Covey quotes T.S. Eliot here. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
So it's about coming back to ourselves, to those inner truths.
And that connects to his concept of the maturity continuum.
Which is that progression from dependence to independence to interdependence?
Exactly. Dependence is relying on others, independence is being self-reliant, and interdependence is choosing to connect deeply with others.
But you have to be independent before you can be truly interdependent, right?
Exactly. You can't skip steps in this process.
Like you were saying before about the child learning to walk.
It's the same with emotional and character development. And Covey says that habits 1, 2, and 3 focus on those private victories, the ones that move us from dependence to independence.
So that's the foundation for everything else.
You can't have those public victories, success in your relationships, without first mastering yourself.
Okay, so let's talk about the PPC balance. What's that all about?
This is all about balancing the production of desired results with the production capability.
So like getting things done versus having the capacity to keep getting things done.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of the goose that lays the golden eggs.
If you only focus on getting the eggs, you'll eventually kill the goose.
Right, and then you won't get any more eggs.
But you have to take care of the goose too.
Exactly. You have to nurture the source of the results.
And he gives examples of this in different areas of life, right?
Yeah, like if you don't maintain your car, it will eventually break down.
Or if you overwork your employees, they'll burn out.
Exactly. It's about thinking long term.
And he even shares that story about his daughter and wanted to watch Star Wars.
Even though he wasn't into it himself, he chose to spend quality time with her.
He put the relationship first.
Exactly. He nurtured the goose, even though it meant giving up a potential golden egg.
So this applies to organizations too, right?
Definitely, like that manager who pushed the machine too hard for short-term gains.
And it ended up backfiring
Leaders who understand the PPC balance, they invest in their people.
because they know that's the key to long-term success.
Exactly. Okay, so Covey suggests 2 initial paradigm shifts to help us really get value from this material.
What are those?
First, don't just read this once and put it aside.
Keep coming back to it.
Exactly. And second, be open to sharing what you're learning with others.
Like talk about it with friends or family.
Yeah, I can help you understand it better, and it might even help them, too.
So what are some of the benefits of really focusing on those first 3 habits, the private victories?
Covey says it leads to increased self-confidence, a deeper understanding of yourself, a stronger sense of direction, more integrity, and more inner peace.
That sounds pretty amazing.
It is. It's about defining yourself from within rather than letting other people define you.
Which brings us to the social mirror.
Right. That's how other people see us.
But Covey says it's often distorted.
Yeah, it can reflect more about them than about us.
So we shouldn't rely too much on it.
And this leads into his discussion of proactivity.
Well, what's that all about?
It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our response to whatever happens to us.
Like we're not just victims of our circumstances.
Exactly. And he talks about these 3 social maps of determinism:
Like what?
genetic determinism, psychic determinism, and environmental determinism.
So the idea that we're basically programmed by our genes, our upbringing, our environment.
Right, but Covey challenges that he draws on Viktor Frankl's experience in the concentration camps.
Oh, wow.
Frankl discovered that even in those horrific conditions, he still had the freedom to choose his response.
So even in the worst possible situation, we still have some control.
And that's what proactivity is all about.
It's about taking responsibility for our choices.
Exactly. Covey says that responsibility is responsibility.
I like that.
And he emphasizes that it's not what happens to us that hurts us, but our reaction to it.
So we can choose to let things make us bitter, or we can choose to let them make us stronger.
He allows that story about Carol, who was terminally ill.
But she chose to use her remaining time to write her life story and messages for her children.
Even facing death, she was proactive.
That's so inspiring.
And he gives another example of those depressed executives.
Instead of just complaining about the economy, they ask themselves, what are we going to do about it?
And that shift in focus led them to take action.
It's amazing how just changing our questions can change everything.
And Covey even talks about love being a verb.
Like it's something you do, not just something you feel.
Exactly. He tells that story about the man whose love for his wife had faded.
And the advice he got was simply, love her.
Like, make the choice to act lovingly, even if you don't feel it at the moment.
That's powerful. Okay, so let's talk about the circle of concern and the circle of influence.
Okay, so the circle of concern includes all the things we worry about but can't control.
Like the weather or politics.
Right. And the circle of influence includes the things we can actually do something about.
So it's about focusing our energy where it matters.
Exactly. Covey says that when we spend too much time in our circle of concern, we give away our power.
Like we let those things control it.
And he uses the example of his son again.
When they were focused on things outside their control, they didn't make any progress.
But when they shifted their attention to their own paradigms and actions, things started to change.
So it's about focusing on what we can influence.
Exactly. And he talks about this thing called emotional myopia.
What's that?
It's when people who actually have a lot of influence get stuck in their circle of concern.
Like they focus on what they can't control instead of what they can.
And he gives the example of that proactive executive.
The one whose circle of influence grew because he consistently delivered insightful analysis.
Right, while the reactive executives were stuck in blame and negativity.
So it's not just about our position, but about our mindset.
Exactly. And Covey also emphasizes the importance of consequence.
Even though they're in our circle of concern.
Right, we can't control them, but we have to consider them when we're making choices.
Because our actions have ripple effects.
And finally, he talks about the power of making and keeping commitments.
Both to ourselves and to others.
That's the essence of proactivity.
Okay, so what are some practical ways to apply all this?
Covey suggests listening to your language for reactive phrases.
Like, if only or I can't.
Exactly. And he recommends proactively planning your response to situations that typically trigger you.
So you're prepared to handle them effectively.
And he suggests making a 30-day commitment to being more proactive in your daily life.
Okay, so learner now for a really powerful question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine your own funeral.
Whoa, okay.
What would you want the speakers to say about you?
That's deep.
What kind of person would you want them to have seen?
I'm getting chills.
This visualization, it's about connecting with your deepest values.
At things that really matter.
The things that are in your circle of influence.
It's about defining your own success.
Exactly. And Covey explains that this all ties into the habit, begin with the end in mind.
Which is all about the power of vision.
He says all things are created twice, first in the mind and then in reality.
Like a blueprint for a house.
Exactly. If we don't create our own mental blueprint for our life, we end up just reacting to whatever comes our way.
He uses that analogy of the leader who climbs to the top of the tree and shouts, "Wrong jungle."
While everyone else is busy clearing the undergrowth below.
They're working hard, but they're headed in the wrong direction.
So we need to know where we're going before we start taking steps.
And that often involves what he calls rescripting.
Like rewriting the old stories we've been telling ourselves.
Exactly. He gives that amazing example of Anwar Sadat, who was able to overcome years of animosity towards Israel.
It shows how we can actually change our deepest beliefs.
And Covey provides examples of personal mission statements in the book.
Like a written statement of your values and goals.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that identifying your core values is important.
Like what you really care about.
But we can get so caught up in the day-to-day that we lose sight of those things.
Like we're busy, but we're not effective.
And that's where our imagination and our conscience come in.
To help us get back on track.
Exactly. Covey says, I can live out of my imagination instead of my memory. I can tie myself to my limitless potential instead of my limiting past. I can become my own first creator.
And he provides some guidelines for creating your own mission statement.
Things like succeed at home first, never compromise with honesty, listen twice as much as you speak.
These are like principles to live by.
And having a clear mission statement helps you make decisions more easily.
Because you know what you're working towards.
And he also talks about the importance of being principle-centered.
Not spouse-centered or money-centered or work-centered.
Exactly, because when our center is something external, it can easily be shaken.
But principles are timeless.
They provide a solid foundation.
He gives that example of having to work late unexpectedly.
And how different centers would influence your reaction.
If you're spouse-centered, you might resent it.
If you're work-centered, you might feel guilty.
But if you're principle-centered, you can make a decision based on your values.
Without letting your emotions take over.
So finding your center is crucial.
And Covey emphasizes the importance of looking inward to discover your unique talents and passions.
What makes you you?
And he also talks about engaging both sides of your brain.
The logical and the creative.
Exactly. And he stresses that creating your mission statement is just the first step.
You have to live it out every day.
And that means applying it to all of the roles in your life.
Parent, spouse, employee, citizen.
And setting goals that are in alignment with your mission.
So it's about taking that vision and turning it into action.
And for families, he recommends creating a shared family mission statement.
So everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And he even gives examples of organizational mission statements.
Like IBM of the Ritz-Carlton.
Showing how these principles can apply at any level.
And the key is to involve everyone in the process.
So they feel ownership and commitment.
Okay, so what are some practical tips for getting started with begin with the end in mind?
Covey suggests taking time to visualize your funeral.
And really think about what you want people to say about you.
And he recommends identifying the roles you play in your life.
And assessing whether you're on track to achieve your vision in each area.
And then actually setting aside time to write your personal mission statement.
So it's about moving from visualization to action.
And finally, he recommends reviewing a chart he provides that outlines different life-centered approaches.
To help you identify your own tendencies.
And consider where they might be leading you.
Wow, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We've talked about paradigms, principles, proactivity, and the power of having a clear end in mind.
As you continue to explore these ideas, I want to leave you with that same powerful question about your funeral.
It's a question that can really make you think.
What would you want people to say about you? What kind of life do you want to have lived?
These are big questions, but they're worth asking.
Because they can help you define your own vision for your life.
And remember that vision is within your circle of influence.
You have the power to create it.
You are the author of your own story.
We encourage you to use these principles to create a life that is both effective and fulfilling.
And to find that peace amidst the chaos.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.
The journey is just beginning.
And remember, learner, the power is within you.
You got this.